The wait for Kingdom Hearts 2 felt like one of the longest for any video game. KH2 and Final Fantasy XII is what I'd consider the start of when Square Enix began having notoriously long wait times between entries in their series. It was nearly 4 years between Kingdom Hearts 1's release and Kingdom Hearts 2's release in North America. I know that might not sound like a lot by today's standards, but keep in mind that the release dates between Final Fantasy VII and X are only a little over 4 years. In fact, the 6th generation of consoles was when we started to experience the long wait between entries in ambitious franchises. Not everything took forever. I mean, Sonic could still have a mainline entry every 2 years maximum with many spin-offs in the middle, and oh shit, there's a big old buzzword we're gonna have in this video that we'll get to pretty soon. During those 4 years, Kingdom Hearts 2 became one of the earliest games I got hyped for and bought at release. And it was a hype well worth it. Turning Kingdom Hearts 2 on for the first time was magical. Seeing Square Enix rather than Soft, a brand new rendition of Dearly Beloved, Sora's new black outfit, and he upgraded to some ice cream instead of a fucking fishbone, I was about to reunite with the magic of Kingdom Hearts 1 without knowing that this was fixing to be one of the fullest RPGs, hack and slash, and general stories to ever come from the medium. While that may sound like a bold statement, I am fully committed to that, and you'll have a hard time changing my mind. I played KH2 when I was pretty young, and I feel the need to make my biases clear, especially because A, I think bias transparency is always important in any kind of writing, and B, I'm about to get critical for a bit, and I don't mean in the difficulty I picked. 4 years is a long time, so KH2's intro CG nicely recaps most of the important parts of KH1 in a very JoJo OP-esque way, where if you played it, you recognize everything. If not, you'll find yourself confused. We see our 3 islanders islanding, Sora, Donald, and Goofy arriving at Hollow Bastion, fighting Riku Ansem, sealing the door to darkness, and Kairi going home to Destiny Islands, where she transforms into her KH2 design to signify the passage of time since the first game. A simplistic recap after 4 years. Wait a minute, blonde chick? Stairs? Riku? Coats? Ansem? Femboy? Why's Sora going into the pod? And who's this blonde guy that I'm suddenly playing as? Well, all of those but the last one is answered by
Kingdom Hearts, Chain of Memories. Rated E for everyone.
Yep, in 2004, Square Enix released Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories for Game Boy Advance. And if you know anything about when a game series goes from a home console to a handheld, that normally means it's an 800% skippable spin-off like the non-canon Ghost Babel, the barely canon Grunty's Revenge, or it's a watered-down cash grab like motherfucking Attack of the Twonkies. Well, Chain of Memories is a direct sequel to Kingdom Hearts 1 that takes place 25 days after Sora stabbed himself in Hollow Bastion. Thank you 358 for your timeline. Chain of Memories is the important link that chains together the stories of KH1 and KH2. However, most people that played KH2 skipped out on Chain of Memories originally. It was a GBA spin-off, they're unimportant. It's not like Mega Man Extreme was ever mentioned in the mainline X games. A small number of people eventually did play the PS2 remake that came out 2 years after KH2 in North America, and that's the version put into the collection, which means it's the one I'm using for HD footage. There is debate on which version of Chain of Memories is better, but I have no intention of partaking in that debate today, as it's mostly related to gameplay aspects, and I'm not fucking playing this twice today, you kidding me? I think Square Enix knew most players would skip Chain because jumping forward majorly, Sora, Donald, Goofy, and Jiminy, who I never mentioned as the Navi in the series during part 1, have their memories wiped at the end, forgetting the events of everything that happened in this game. Because of that, Chain of Memories is not an important story for the 4 of them, but is for the player and all the other major actors like Riku, Mickey, and a few of our 8 spanking new characters. Yeah, remember how last time I mentioned that KH1 only had 4 characters? Well, the stupid GBA game tripled that number. But as a bridging entry to KH2, Chain doesn't aim to answer who any of these new players are, aside from their baseline character archetypes, unless the answer comes in the form of a question. There's a lot of those this time.
Those would be the Sault Ste. Marie.
Getting to the basic premise of Calm, the gang follows a stranger in a black cloak into a place called Castle Oblivion, where they're told that they will remember old memories long forgotten and lose ones they had, which gameplay-wise is immediately used to put our characters back to level 1. Since Calm was designed for the GBA, they couldn't really replicate the PS2 gameplay, and the battle system relies entirely on cards for every single attack, and thank God this retrospective is focusing on story because this shit is intricate and we'd be here a while. The GBA limitations and card system shape some of the story as as well. Cards are how Sora gains access into all of the worlds from Kingdom Hearts 1 in the form of their memories of those events. Although Deep Jungle is missing because of rights issues, and there's one new world that comes from the memories locked in the other side of Sora's heart. The rules are a little loose in the returning locales because sometimes the gang remembers the last visit, while other times they act like it's a new location. Memories are fucked and there's no rules to it. And I know last part I mentioned how some of the entries try to tie each Disney world into its overall message, which in Chain of Memories is about how our actions and emotions are shaped by our memories. So basically the Disney worlds take the KH2 story and replace some of the old nouns with memories and then cut out half of the story. Cloud is looking for memories instead of Sephiroth, Dr. Finkelstein is trying to create some memory doodad instead of a heart, and I kinda zoned out for most of the rest. I honestly plan on defending this during part 1, but it's actually thrown together pretty shoddily and not worth focusing on. Because of all the returning Disney worlds, Castle Oblivion has 13 floors, and only 2, debatably 4, are actually important for Sora's story. Everything of real importance occurs between floors. See, Chain of Memory structure goes like this: see important cutscene, play world, see new important cutscene with a boss fight, repeat. The higher you go, Sora begins remembering about his old friend Naminé, becoming obsessed with her, while also forgetting about Kairi. Over the course of the adventure, Sora fights 4 people in black hoodies that offhandedly mention that they're Nobodies in some kind of organization. We have Vexen the scientist, Larxene the bitch, Marluxia the long-haired final boss, and Axel the sketchy cool bro popular character. Each of the 4 have their own goals that don't fully align with each other. Larxene and Marluxia's aim is to overthrow the organization by wrecking Sora's memories enough to turn him into their slave. They accomplish this not by the castle itself as introduced, but a special power that Naminé possesses. See, they don't hide this too much, but Sora never really knew Naminé. She's a self-described witch who can alter people's memories to her or her captor's wishes. What she's doing is essentially replacing all memories of Kairi with herself. Since Sora doesn't know that, he vows that he's going to save her no matter what, even after she reveals his memories are fake. All stories since 2001 are secretly SA2 ripoffs, and you can't prove otherwise.
Still me.
Vexen's goal is to test out his new replica program, which he hopes can be used to clone entire beings, hearts and all. He tests this program with a replica of Riku that has also been
Mind Crush
by Naminé, forgetting that he and Sora made up at the end of KH1. You fight Repliku like 4 times, and Sora only gets more confused by it each go. Now, Axel's motives are vague through most of the story. He sides with Marluxia's plan for most of it, even going so far as to kill Vexen.
What the fuck?
To gain Marluxia's trust, though later he frees Naminé because of a strange bond he feels towards Sora that's hinted at when Sora defeated him. And with all 4 of them killed, Naminé puts Sora, Donald, and Goofy into these pods for 1 year so that their memories can be restored, with the major repercussion of forgetting everything and everyone introduced in Chain of Memories, allowing players that went from KH1 straight to KH2 an easier point of entry. You still miss out a lot by skipping Chain of Memories, but you still possess the same knowledge Sora has, meaning we can now go straight into Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories Reverse Rebirth. Yeah, once you beat Chain of Memories as Sora, you unlock a second campaign as Riku that's about 1/3 the length of Sora's. Riku's story takes place after a glimmer of light released him from the realm of darkness into the basement floors of Castle Oblivion. Despite his defeat, Riku can still feel a lingering part of Ansem's darkness within him, and Riku strives to vanquish it. To help him on his quest is Mickey, with his brand new Nomura design, beginning their close friendship lasting throughout the series. There's also a mysterious man in red cloth known as Diz who has a hatred for the organization and wants Riku to accept darkness to defeat it. Riku's enemy during his story are 2 more organization members known as Zexion and Lexaeus, Riku Replica again, and the remaining piece of Ansem I mentioned a minute ago. Zexion and Lexaeus kinda do jack all for development in this game, and I think Lexaeus had less than 10 lines in the whole franchise, so I'm gonna ignore him during just this entire retrospective. The important part of them is that during a battle with Zexion, Riku is told by a Kairi ghost, later revealed as Naminé, that darkness will always be within him, and as long as he doesn't fall completely to it, he can use its power in tandem with the light. Riku's arc began as a journey to remove the darkness and led to him learning not to fear it and use darkness responsibly for the rest of the series. An idea he could only truly grasp with the light of Naminé's guidance and Mickey's unwavering friendship, making Mickey the only person Riku trusts in the period between Chain of Memories and KH2. Back to the villains, Riku defeats Lexaeus on his own while Axel finishes the job on Zexion. Though Axel doesn't appear in the rest of Riku's story, he really just appeared to confirm he survived his confrontation with Sora. Similar to Sora's story, Riku Replica shows up intermittently during the campaign, first after one fight with Vexen, which he needed to get Riku's data. Despite this being the same replica Riku from Sora's story, he is actually aware he's a fake during Riku's, which is a neat contrast to his persona in Sora's story. It's like if Riku had even more existential crises added on to the ones he has.
Because I'm you. No, I'm me. I'm me, he says.
That's it, entirety of Kingdom Hearts. Either way, Riku beats Repliku at that weird location from earlier, and since he's a replica that's not meant to live at all, his defeat implies that he's absolutely dead for good, with no chance of even going to the Realm of Darkness. Since every organization member except Axel is defeated, Riku can safely visit Naminé, who's watching over Sora in his pod. She offers to let him sleep in a pod to completely remove his darkness as well, though Riku refuses the offer since the darkness has become a part of him, and removing it will affect who he is. Meaning all Riku has left to do in the castle is defeat Ansem in a ludicrously hard final boss that I've got to grind for on just about every run. Riku actually almost falls to the darkness again afterwards, but Mickey saves him from the darkness one more time. Even after all that, Riku still senses Ansem within himself, which is why he still doesn't feel ready to go home, allowing Reverse Rebirth to end with Riku and Mickey walking between light and darkness, which they call the Road to Dawn, with some cool new black hoods given to them by their strange new benefactor Diz, which should keep them out of the organization's sights. Now, for as quickly as it seemed I went over Chain of Memories, I want to clarify that I only skipped unimportant stuff. Chain of Memories' point is not to further expand our main party's story, but to expand past them. Make Riku more heroic, the introduction of this mysterious organization, a true balance between light and darkness, question who Diz and Naminé might be, and most importantly, bridge the gap between Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2 in an interesting way that lets people jump between only those two titles. And while I am stressing how that's possible now, Chain of Memories is going to become way more important when we reach Days. So don't think this is the last time I'm gonna bring up some of its new topics like memories, replicas, and most importantly for today's video, Nobodies.
Another dream about him.
Now we're back to Kingdom Hearts 2, with all of those questions answered, mostly by more questions, none of which answering the identity of the blonde kid. Well, this is Roxas, and he's who we play as in Kingdom Hearts 2. Just like how the introduction of KH1 was spent introducing the Destiny Island trio, the intro of KH2 introduces us to Roxas and his friends Hainer, Pence, and Olette. Roxas is on his final week of summer vacation in the slightly familiar Twilight town, living his best life. Just as he and his friends always have, they worry about looking cool to the rest of the town, getting even with some bullies, and eating sea salt ice cream on a clock tower they shouldn't be allowed on. Roxas is living the dream, a completely carefree lifestyle.
Restoration at 12%.
Where am I?
At least, that's what it should be. Roxas has been having strange visions and flashes of events he doesn't remember with people he doesn't know. Despite his confusion, Roxas ignores it since he needs to live summer vacation to the fullest. Made hard by Cypher, Raijin, and Fujin from FF8, as well as Vivi from 9, who's been making Roxas's gang look bad. One of the ways they do this to them is by spreading rumors across town that they're the ones that have been stealing the recently missing photos. In actuality, it's someone far more vile, a white person! After chasing the white creature to a familiar mansion, Roxas finds he can't hurt him with his foam struggle bats. Lucky for him, it somehow transforms into the Keyblade. That's right, in Kingdom Hearts 2, Roxas is the new chosen keybearer, giving him the power to defeat the white creature, revealing the photos it stole, which all had Roxas inside of them, pondering the question of if the monster was trying to steal the real Roxas rather than just the photos. Summer vacation only gets weirder for Roxas, with guys in black coats showing up to impede his fun, more visions he doesn't understand, time stops caused by this girl in a white dress who wanted to meet him at least once, and another attack from the white creatures. It's a lot of stuff that makes no sense to Roxas and culminates into a dive into his heart. Though what we see on that mural is not Roxas, but Sora and his 4 closest friends. Once finished, Naminé introduces herself properly to Roxas and asks if he remembers his true name. Once Roxas wakes up from that dive, things go back to normal for a bit, with Roxas taking part in a big competition. It goes swimmingly until he defeats a noticeably overpowered Vivi. His world suddenly stops again, with Axel showing up to spout what Roxas recognizes as fucking nonsense. Axel tells him that this world is his creation and is saddened by how number 13, Roxas, doesn't remember him. After that fight with Axel, Diz shows up to tell Roxas to ignore Axel, leading Roxas to his own mental breakdown before life goes back to normal. And right now is a good time to keep this in mind. Everyone we've seen so far is either new to Kingdom Hearts 2 or from Chain of Memories. No matter what, this introduction is meant to leave the player in question, but jumping in straight from KH1 will do so even more. Roxas is 100% that player. His knowledge of Chain of Memories is non-existent, and thoughts of KH1 are blurred because it came out 4 years ago, a time span considered long in the mid-2000s. Even the Final Fantasy characters used here aren't exactly popular ones besides Vivi. Chain of Memories players have a slight connection with Axel, Diz, and Naminé, but their motives aren't clear in this instance. We understand that Axel wants to bring Roxas home with him and reawaken some memories within, Naminé desires to spend time with him, and Diz doesn't want either of the two of them influencing Roxas. It's only made more confusing when someone in a black coat helping Diz reveals his identity.
It's Ansem.
Oh, fuck!
All of these people seem to know who Roxas is and have someone they want him to be, while Roxas himself doesn't. Only continuing his confusion is a strange mind link he suddenly has with a noticeably older Kairi who's on Destiny Islands. And through this link, we find that she doesn't remember Sora anymore. After all that weirdness, Roxas still insists that he needs to just have a normal summer vacation day with his friends. No matter who he is, he just wants his summer vacation. But after one last abnormal day, Roxas had to learn who he is from Naminé. At one point, he was Axel's best friend, inseparable from him as a member of the organization. Though at the same time, he's also holding on to half of Sora's persona. In order for Sora to wake up from his slumber, Roxas cannot exist. Roxas shouldn't exist, leaving Roxas with an ultimatum. He can go back to being Axel's best friend, or accept his nothingness by returning to Sora. And in one more flashback, with knowledge that Roxas is part of Sora, and had a spot in the organization, we learn that he was the dual-wielding Keyblade user in the Kingdom Hearts 1 secret ending, fighting against a long-haired Riku. Roxas then wakes up one last time in Twilight Town to find that he can't interact with his friends anymore. He knows that it's at this point he has to accept who he is. But to Axel's disappointment, he still doesn't remember him, resulting in Roxas running to the mansion to find Naminé again. There, Roxas remembers his past life. Roxas's time in Organization 13 was not exactly fun and games. He betrayed Organization 13, and as it turns out, they're trying to create Kingdom Hearts. Before Naminé can explain Roxas's fate, Diz appears to state that Nobodies have no rights and that his fate is sealed. And as he takes Naminé away, she says that they'll meet again even if they don't realize it. Roxas then accepts his fate. He needs to wake up Sora, which leads him to learn that he's been in a simulated Twilight Town ever since Riku beat him in combat. This entire prologue we played was in a fake data reconstruction of Twilight Town. With his memories fully restored, Roxas summons his 2 Keyblades for one last fight against his best friend to put his Organization 13 days behind him, afterwards promising each other they'll meet up in the next life. Walking into the next room, Roxas finds Donald and Goofy, who are still fast asleep in their pods, and he has the slightest memories of them. In the room housing Sora's gigantic pod, Roxas has one last confrontation with Diz, confirming that Diz wants to rid all of the realms of the organization, which can't happen as long as Sora sleeps. With the opening of Sora's pod, Roxas's summer vacation finally ends.
Looks like my summer vacation is over.
finally beginning Kingdom Hearts 2. This is one of the most controversial prologues of all time, mainly from its length. I've played Kingdom Hearts 2 countless times and know the strats to get through the prologue quickly. It still took me 2 hours without skipping any cutscenes, and I can fully understand why some people are turned off by it. It's a story of accepting your past, your actions, and your identity, so you can use those to shape your future actions. Roxas comes to terms with himself so he can finally move on. We don't even play as Roxas for a tenth of the experience, but as we'll see, it shapes the entire narrative going forward. It's one of the greatest prologues I've ever played through, and I wouldn't change it. This summer vacation was meant to raise questions, solve mysteries, and produce a tone for Kingdom Hearts 2. But just like a real summer vacation, memories of it blur away as our 3 party members have no clue about the events that transpired, with any of Roxas's existence fallen deep into Sora's heart, as he's found and accepted who he is. And it's funny now because we are changing our tone dramatically. I mean, we go directly from one of the most somber scenes in the franchise to Sora, Donald, Goofy, and even Jiminy being their dumb old selves. And as far as they know and how they treat the game is that they just finished Ansem. Similar to Honey Pop 2, there is no time spent on recapping. They just go for it. The only abnormalities they recognize is that they've been asleep for a while and that Jiminy's journal only has one line in it reading, "Thank Namine," who none of them know. And since they have no clue who that is, they go back to their primary goal: find Riku and find the king. Which actually goes pretty well, because when they find Hainer, Pence, and Olette, who keep in mind are the real ones, meaning they never knew Roxas, Pence tells the gang that a guy with round ears was looking for them, which begins one of KH2's giant teases: when do we get to see Mickey? At the end of Chain of Memories, Mickey and Riku got the coats, and as such, they both wear them for a while in KH2. And for people that didn't play COM, or dumbasses like me, who turned off their Game Boys without knowing about Reverse Rebirth until a few years later, they still had not seen Mickey in the Kingdom Hearts series. And here in Twilight Town, the gang finally meets with Mickey after fighting the white guys, and he keeps his face hidden, body in the coat, and just gives the gang instructions on what to do next, as well as a money pouch and crystal that Roxas had in the data world. This tease is a neat way to pull you along, and also ludicrously funny since this is the most recognizable fictional character on Earth. And speaking of recognizable, Mickey sends the boys out on a train with a design that's clearly inspired by Fantasia. Not so much hiding a secret that we learn once we get to the location, where Pete tells us that this is Master Yensid's tower, who in this universe used to be a Keyblade master and trained Mickey. Oh wait, Pete? Pete here was banished to another dimension a long time ago by the king, which is actually retconned to Minnie doing it in Birth by Sleep, but we'll get to that in part 3. Maleficent broke him out of that place, leading to Pete swearing loyalty to her and any of her causes. Pete, however, doesn't realize that Maleficent died in KH1, so he's kinda sending Heartless around all willy-nilly. He doesn't have to do that too long though, because Maleficent is revealed to have come back to life in a way not explained until Union Cross, so we're just ignoring that in this retrospective, maybe someday. And now the 2 of them and the Heartless will act as one of the enemies the gang encounters. And notice there, just one of the enemies. Once we reach the top of the tower, Yensid explains that Sora's quest is far grander than just finding Riku and the king. Of course we, the player, know that because Diz, Chain of Memories, Axel, and just literally everything else. But Sora is still out of the loop, so we have 2 different factions to face. The first being the returning Heartless, led by Pete, Maleficent, and a few Disney villains. Yensid clarifies that the gang's achievements in KH1 did slow the spread of Heartless significantly, but because of the Heartless's origin of the darkness within hearts, the only way to rid them forever would be to rid all hearts of darkness, which is gonna be pretty tough. It's essentially an explanation to clarify why they can exist in every game taking place after Ansem's experiments. Now getting to our second enemies, we have the white creatures finally titled the Nobodies. When someone with a strong heart and will becomes a Heartless, the body they leave behind becomes a nobody. Thankfully, the strong will and heart part means that the number of Nobodies does not match that of Heartless, making Heartless the more common mook in the adventure. As only a body, Nobodies do not have hearts, and as such, no true emotions. Their actions and goals are led by the memories of their emotions, in some ways making them more thought compared to the instinct of the Heartless. As for their name, again, it's not meant to mean they lack a body, given that this is all they have, but rather that they shouldn't exist. The Nobodies are not creatures of the dark like the Heartless, or of light such as our heroes. They exist in nothing, making them nobody. While they do act on thought rather than instinct, they're not exactly too intelligent, as it's possible for stronger Nobodies to order them around. Said stronger Nobodies being Organization 13, and if you're smart enough, you might be able to figure out that the name comes from the amount of members. Which, keeping in mind the 5 who died in Chain of Memories and the removal of Roxas, there's only 7 left in Kingdom Hearts 2, including Axel, leaving us with 6 more identities to uncover and their motives still lost to the gang, since that reveal occurred during the Roxas portion. And now we have our 3 factions set. Sora, Donald, Goofy, and other heroes of light they meet, Pete and Maleficent with their Heartless army aiming for universal control through darkness, and Organization 13 with their covert Nobodies aiming to create Kingdom Hearts for a yet unexplained reason. This scene's final purpose, while not explicitly stated, is to cement the suspicion most players might already have by now: Roxas was Sora's nobody. And it's not just his story that gives it away. There's pieces of his design, such as the predominantly white color palette, as well as the added pieces of black to symbolize his betweenness. Many of the Nobodies we see have the same palette, though there's also a bit of a pink scale on some of them. To set our party on the right path, Yensid reunites the gang with their gummy ship and has the fairies from Sleeping Beauty set Sora up with some new duds since he's too big for the old ones. It still possesses all of the Mickey colors I praised from the first design, but now the predominant color across the fit is black. It sets the mood that Sora has matured and parallels the primarily white drip that Roxas wore. By the way, it's not actually just Sora's size that grew, his voice has also changed in the year he slept.
Sure. Don't mention it.
Not because they changed voice actor, but because Haley Joel Osment, the voice of Sora, went through puberty. It's kinda just convenient writing-wise since there's a time skip, though the cutscenes in Chain of Memories are a bit awkward because they were recorded after Kingdom Hearts 2. So we hear post-puberty Osment on a younger Sora. Back to the fit, it has a power within that lets Sora transform into 5 different drive forms that actually have some story meaning, so I'll rush right through them. 3 of the forms allow Sora to dual-wield Keyblades, which looks really badass, allowing us to finally do what we saw Roxas do in the secret ending, and there is no reason for his capability to do this. Let's not worry about it. It's just badass. The first form you get here is the Red Valor form, which represents Sora's raw strength and relies on his friendship with Goofy. The Blue Wisdom form, which you get around the 1/4 point, represents his magic and relies on his friendship with Donald. A little before the midway point, you get Limit form that represents Sora's past, which makes his color scheme that of KH1 and gives access to some KH1 abilities like Ars Arcanum and Sonic Blade. Then Master form comes a little after the midway point, representing the fusion of Valor and Wisdom form, thus relying on his friendship with Donald and Goofy, though guest party members can be subbed in. I don't bother much with this one though, because the physical combos aren't quite as good as Valor, and magic never reaches a finisher like with Wisdom. And I'm gonna wait until near the end to talk about the 5th form because it has some important story connotations. And yeah, that's an interesting thing with drive forms. It's one of the few bits of story KH2 tells through gameplay, especially the 6th punishment drive, Anti-form, occurring when you use drive forms too often. It turns Sora into a Heartless-like form representing the darkness in his heart. His abuse of his power stains him, resulting in him allowing it out. There's a handy chart on the KH wiki to explain when it happens, because it's a really in-depth algorithm, and I'd recommend keeping it in mind when you're doing a playthrough. Anti-form's an interesting reminder that despite how much he battles for light, Sora still has a bit of darkness he has to defeat within, and I'm hoping they eventually explore this further, because as far as today goes, they still haven't explored this outside of Anti-form, and a similar form we'll see in Kingdom Hearts 3. Let's get back into worlds, because we talked about them for a while last time, and they work a lot differently this time now that they're not turbo-screwed by Ansem. So as you'll recall, the gang could traverse the various worlds in KH1 because the Heartless weakened the barrier between them, and defeating Ansem restored those barriers, disconnecting our boys from the outside world. Well, in Kingdom Hearts 2 and every game onwards, invisible ties connecting the hearts of the worlds have sprouted around, and using the Keyblade, Sora can unlock roads created by them. So now instead of locking keyholes in each world, Sora's gotta find an item in each world that unlocks the road to new ones. I'll be honest, it's a little bit of a weak explanation, totally needed though, because you can't have a franchise based around traveling various worlds continue if the main characters are stuck on one world. Now, what is an interesting theme of the worlds we're going to get into in the first act is reunion. With one exception, every world in Kingdom Hearts 2 has some connection to our heroes. Some straight up returning worlds like Olympus, Halloween Town, Agrabah, and Hollow Bastion, which is now inhabited by FF characters, while other worlds like like Beast Castle, Pride Lands, and Land of Dragons just have characters our heroes met in the first game. Now when they met Beast is pretty obvious, but Pride Lands and Land of Dragons is pretty interesting because actually in Kingdom Hearts 1 you could summon Simba and Mushu, which yeah, I know, I never talked about summons in KH1, but I am now, so whatever. And what I will mention in this one, Chicken Little's a summon in this game, and God, he's so dated. He doesn't have any story purpose, and I feel like it's one of the few things in the KH franchise based on a agreeable bad Disney movie. I mean, he feels more dated than the Pirates of the Caribbean world. Speaking of, Pirates is the one world that doesn't have any connection to KH1, so it does stick out like a bit of a sore thumb during the first act. I've always felt that it's here a bit more to show how cool the PS2 is for having realistic humans, even though Final Fantasy XII is gonna blow it out of the water in just a few months. Maybe I could say it fits the idea of reunion because Sora's also an island boy, but that's a bit too far of a stretch for me. Oh, in island life, Kairi actually has her own little story going on. Turns out that during the year when Sora, Donald, and Goofy slumbered, Kairi and everyone else forgot about them. There's an explanation along the lines of memories are connected to hearts and all hearts are connected, but they didn't play these rules all that consistently because Riku, the king, Axel, and the rest of the organization showed no signs of forgetting them. Maybe you could argue Riku and the King's vicinity to nominate kept them safe and the organization don't have hearts to forget. It's a plot point more meant to connect with us as a player, and it's only ever brought up by Kairi, Leon, Yuffie, and I think Diz mentioned it in passing. It's only really actually important to Kairi though, as during the prologue there was a scene of her and Selphie talking about how Riku's been gone for a year, and Kairi recalls another boy that always played with them. They don't remember his name until after she writes a letter to him when she has the conviction to believe that it'll reach him.
Right? Sora?
Kairi is then unmentioned for the next 7 hours since Sora assumes she's Gucci on the islands while his boyfriend is not. And well, Sora, you know what they say about assuming, it makes an ass of you and not me, cause guess what, Kairi ends up leaving the island with Pluto, ending up at Twilight Town during a period of the game the gang isn't capable of going back there. There she meets up with Hainer, Pence, and Olette, bonding over knowing Sora a bit, then ultimately getting kidnapped by Axel a little bit before Sora can get there, putting her as just a damsel in distress again for most of the rest of the game. Disappointing because they built her up a bit here, but it is still Disney and Final Fantasy, Princess need a savin'. Alright, back to our main party. Despite the first impressions, Twilight Town isn't our base of operations in KH2. Rather, Hollow Bastion from the end of KH1 fills that role. HB is nothing like it used to be. The area we explored in KH1 was just the castle of Hollow Bastion, as the rest of the world was too overwhelmed by darkness to explore. Hence that miasma we saw at the bottom. With the threat of darkness minimized, the FF gang has set up a restoration committee to fix their home like they set out to do at the end of the first title. We come back to Hollow Bastion a lot throughout the journey, and unlike Traverse Town, it's an important location to the villains, as it's where Ansem conducted his research. Which is why our first visit is when the 6 remaining organization members show themselves. Completely hooded though, so not really to Sora. Only one guy claiming to be not
just any old dude.
Compare Sora to, presumably, Roxas. We as the players get the reason, but Sora is just confused because
Only one me.
You're an idiot.
Now we get to the meat of KH2's first act. I consider the Roxas portion Act 0.7. If Nomura's gonna give shit stupid titles, then so will I. Act 1 of KH2 has a structure noticeably similar to KH1. Nobodies show up in very few stages, and the only times an organization member shows up is a quick appearance by one in a hood at Beast Castle, and a brief run-in with Demyx at Olympus Coliseum, where he yet again calls Sora Roxas in an attempt to change the dominant persona. Besides that, it's more Disney adventures where, as I said earlier, we reunite with those we met in the first game and fight the Disney villain or Heartless who's accompanied by Pete or Maleficent. It's a pretty even mix of if you fight a Heartless or Disney villain, since we've got the Dark Thorn here, Hydra here, Fat Bastards in the desert, and the worst boss at Halloween Town. I had a rant in the first draft, but this is a long enough video. A more striking world we go to is Disney Castle and Timeless River. The reunion here focuses more on Donald and Goofy, who in the eyes of some people in-universe are just as important as Sora. That's why whenever they see the 3, they say,
Sora, Donald, Goofy.
Sora, Donald, and Goofy.
Sora, Donald, and Goofy.
Sora, Donald, Goofy.
Sora, Donald, Goofy!
Okay, I'm gonna stop the compilation here because I put them all together and it was like 2 minutes. We, the player, are playing as Sora and see things mostly from him, which shapes our perception, even if we do know more than him this time. As well, each of the rooms in Disney Castle actually have the same layout as from the cutscenes in KH1, allowing us to see the full room designs while interacting with Minnie and Daisy. The reason you come here is because Disney Castle has what's called the Cornerstone of Light within it. This protects Disney Castle from any form Realm of Darkness, which is why it's going to be just a minigame world in Birth by Sleep. And thanks to the magic of time travel, Heat and Maleficent can sneak some dark thorns around the cornerstone by going back to a period of time before the castle existed. Let's not think too long about how time travel works. Why this happens is just so the KH team could put in a fun world based on the black and white Mickey cartoons with a nicer Pete fighting the big bad mean present Pete, because remember, Mickey was kind of a fucking dick in the black and white cartoons. Upon finishing a botched Kairi save in Twilight Town, a new episode unlocks in Hollow Bastion. Upon arrival, we find a bunch of nobodies roaming about causing trouble. As well, we reunite with Cloud, who's now sporting his Advent Chill drip since they were developing at the same time as this.
I'll get him. This time, we settle it. Me and the one who embodies all the darkness in me.
Cloud does some emo vague tweeting and later clarifies he means he's planning to find Sephiroth. Cloud is seemingly part of the restoration committee as well, or at the very least he's actually interacting with the FF gang. Speaking of that gang, Sid tells the party that Leon found the computer that Ansem used and it may have information about the organization, Nobodies, and the Realm of Darkness, where they believe Riku, Kairi, and the King are. On their way to meet up with Leon, the gang runs into the Gullwings. Okay, so 10.2 was pretty recent when KH2 started development, and 10 as a whole has some interesting representation in Kingdom Hearts so far. Wakka and Tidus were pretty far from their original characters, and Auron's not too off, but is only in Olympus. And then, boy, we got these Gullwings, and that's an interesting take. Yuna, Pain, and Riku have close personalities to their 10.2 depictions, with a bit more mischievous antics added in. And then their bodies are these small fairy versions of their 10.2 designs. While I haven't played much of Final Fantasy X, I've put a good chunk of hours into 10.2 when I was younger, and I would have liked to see all of them, especially Pain, have more representation. Like, I figure Yuna's hard to do right when they already threw Tidus as an island boy, and funny thing with Riku, originally the role Yuffie had in KH1 was attributed to her. Then the team realized that maybe having a character named Riku and Riku playing major roles would be confusing, so they swapped Yuffie into that role instead. I totally get why the three ended up with a subdued role, just a little awkward. Anyways, they want to know what Leon's gang is up to since they work for Maleficent, and after Sora just tells it to them, they just leave. Going forward, they discover the castle portion from Kingdom Hearts 1, though it's in a significantly different state than previously. On arrival, Aerith tells us how the king, as well, is interested in what's on Ansem's computer, furthering the hype to meet him and the computer. No one's in Ansem's room as the gang arrives, because I guess Leon just stepped out for a minute, maybe he had to use the bathroom. Or at least until Tifa's looking for a guy with pointy hair. Which, yeah, it's obviously Cloud, but Sora don't know that. He never played Final Fantasy VII. After Tifa leaves, Leon comes back from his piss break to show us the secret passage that has Ansem's computer. Because of some fiddling by that funny little dude Stitch, it's shown that the computer doubles as a world based on the cult classic Steven Lisenberg film Tron starring Jeff Bridges. While inside, Tron says that he's the copy of a different program that his user found at some point. After some Disney shenanigans, Tron tells us to gain a password from his user so we can access the DTD, which houses all the important and secretive files that the user didn't want exposed. The one big issue with this search for the user is that Ansem the Wise was the user. Oh wow, who would have guessed? The gang and Leon feel a bit disheartened at the idea that they probably can't get the password on account of killing Ansem in the last game. But Tifa shows up and does one more sweep around the room where she picks up this portrait of Ansem in the same way I want her to pick up me, revealing a diagram reading Tron Door to Darkness, or DTD.
Say, fellas, did somebody mention the door to darkness?
Jesus Christ, it's Mickey Mouse! Mickey finally shows up with a visible head to the gang. Still has the coat on, but we're reunited with King Mickey. His Majesty figures out that the DTD password is the 7 Princesses of Heart, and says that if we access the DTD, we can find out where Ansem is. Wait, what? Mickey, you got some splaining to do. And he almost starts. If it weren't for Leon having the party go back to help Tron real quick. Now the boys check the computer to find no information about Kairi, Nobodies, or the organization. All they get is a picture of a white guy, who Mickey suddenly comes in to call Ansem the Wise. Oh yeah, the splainin'. The party's just as confused as we are about this because hey, this and this are not the same guy. In actuality, there's two Ansems. Ansem the Seeker of Darkness was the Heartless of Ansem the Wise's apprentice. Ansem Seeker of Darkness stole the name of his master after banishing him, and the king has been trying to find out where Ansem the Wise has been hiding. As well, the leader of Organization 13 is the Nobody of Ansem's apprentice, connecting Ansem's and the organization's plan. In some ways, this twist might seem just straight out of nowhere, but it does have some basis in KH1's backstory. Leon's gang described Ansem as a wise and great ruler, while Ansem Seeker of Darkness is just about anything but good. And within the secret reports we're going to find in Kingdom Hearts 2, it's retconned that besides the first one in KH1, every single report was written by the Seeker of Darkness and not the Wise. Though since Sora wants answers at this moment, he asks about Riku, but Mickey says that he can't tell us about his whereabouts. Especially because here's when the big mid-game climax happens and all the major players start to converge. The Heroes of Light, Maleficent and the Heartless, the Organization and Nobodies, the Gullwings who join the Heroes of Lights now, and...
Whoa!
Sephiroth just says he's looking for Cloud and repeats some stuff I said in part 1 about being his darkness and all that, which also leads into one of my favorite parts of the entire series. All of the Final Fantasy characters, and Stitch, work at fighting this gargantuan amount of Heartless. Just straight up, it is badass. Especially when we get to see Cloud and Leon interacting together.
Think you can handle this many?
Well, might be tough if one more shows up.
Then that'll have to be the one I take care of.
What? You're fighting too?
It's just fucking cool. The main series is yet to utilize its Final Fantasy characters as well as this scene sense. Not to say it lacks FF element sense here, just that literal characters from Final Fantasy appearing in front of you hasn't happened like this. We wouldn't even see intra-Final Fantasy crossovers again until Dissidia, and I never owned a PSP. Sephiroth also appears once more to bully Cloud for going to the light of the present and rejecting the darkness of his past, who in this case Sephiroth is the metaphorical manifestation of. Sephi almost gets to him here if it weren't for his light showing up, which just like the rest of us is Tifa. Back to the player party, they go against Mickey's wishes to ignore the ongoing battle by rushing into a fight against the same organization member we met earlier named Demyx. He acts a bit like a wimp, which the party bullies him for, as well as his lack of a heart, leading to one of Nomura's 5D chess lines.
Oh, we do too have hearts. Don't be mad.
On account of Sora being a traitor, Demyx begins a fight that's one of the biggest difficulty spikes for new players, but again, not the focus of today's video. Once Demyx falls, a Heartless blasts a boulder toward the king, only missing because Goofy takes the hit for him, proof that not only does he hold a shield, but that he is one himself. Sadly, Goofy falls in the process, leading to the moment 4 years in the making.
They'll pay for this.
Everyone finally gets to see Mickey in his brand new Kingdom Hearts outfit with his Keyblade ready to fight. Like I said, many people skip Chain of Memories, and even those that did might have not gotten to the middle of Riku's story. I sure didn't. This is the big moment everyone was waiting for. Mickey, Donald, and Sora charge in to avenge their friend, fighting side by side with all of the Final Fantasy characters. Again, one of the series' greatest moments. So great, in fact, that Goofy comes back to life because of it.
And there was much rejoicing.
Just in time to finally meet with not Ansem's Nobody, whose appearance sparks Mickey's memory. Ansem's young apprentice was Xehanort, while his Nobody is Xemnas. And to reach him, Sora needs to kill 1,000 Heartless. As in, you actually fight 1,000 Heartless. The party's finally gonna get all their answers once they confront Xemnas, though he says he knows nothing of Kairi, and that Mickey knows more of Riku than he does. And before Mickey can explain himself, he decides to jump in after Xemnas' dark portal, and the fun don't stop up here because Axel shows up to reintroduce himself to Sora and let him know that every heart he's released from the Heartless hasn't been going back to reform a body. Instead, they've gone to the organization for a reason Sora doesn't know yet. Maybe you can put together 2 and 2. At the same time, Sora learns that the organization kidnapped Kairi while another member, Saïx, shows up to say that Axel has gone rogue and consoles an on-his-knees Sora that Kairi is at least being fed 3 times a day. Saïx decides to attack Sora with a horde of Heartless, leading to Maleficent of all people coming to save him since she believes Kingdom Hearts to be her destiny, sending Sora to the realm of budget ran out, where a cloaked figure gives him sea salt ice cream and a picture with Roxas, who Sora is capable of naming because of Roxas's slumbering memories. Act 2 continues our previous missions through revisits to the various worlds. While the first visit focused on reunion, the second have more focus often on self-discovery, which you can see pretty quickly with the movies picked. Mulan finds her place as a Chinese warrior, Jack as the spirit of Halloween, Iago as not a dick. Fuck! Act 1 was Sora reuniting with the world, while Act 2 is a parallel to Roxas's story of finding himself as an organization member and a piece of Sora. Just as Roxas ran from his fate during summer vacation, many of the Disney characters have their own summer vacations they run for. Simba hangs out with Timon and Pumbers, Jack robes himself in the garments of Christmas, and Hercules undergoes a big ol' depression episode when he assumes Olympus is done with him. And I should be clear, it's not exactly a clean Act 1 is reunion and Act 2 self-discovery type deal. Mulan's done with her story of self-discovery after Visit 1, but most of the worlds don't reach their conclusions during the first act, such as Hercules, who is just in a horrible depression when we leave the first time. As well, these second visits don't have the same enemy each time. Some of them have Organization 13 as the conflict, maybe a Disney character, and others just a random Heartless type beat. In worlds where the story concluded a bit less during Act 1, the antagonist takes a bit of a back seat, letting the Warriors of Light take focus. For example, Beast Castle has a fight against another organization member named Zaldin, and while that may seem like call for focus on him, it instead pushes the narrative for Beast to find himself, which is with Belle. Zaldin exists to push Beast to his final limits, remove his summer vacation from him by robbing him of his rose, and forcing him to come to grips with himself. Not with who he used to be, but who he could. At the end of their discovery, each person has someone waiting for them. Mulan has Li Shang, Simba has his pack, Hercules has Megra. It's the combination of both the reunion and discovery that Sora and Roxas go through. Roxas finds himself as part of Sora, while Sora wants to reunite with all of his friends, especially Kairi and Riku. And a proper reunion can't happen without a found self. At this point, Sora and Kairi seem to have found that, but what about Riku? During the second act, there's a part in Mulan where it's implied Riku had the perfect chance to reunite with Sora, yet he chose not to. Instead, he aided the party from the back by informing the Chinese monarchy of the organization. We even have a fight with who seems like a really tall Riku, yet he doesn't just stop to say, "Hey Sora, it's me, ya boy," which only adds to this mystery. And if you haven't noticed by now, we're yet to see Riku's face a single time since KH2 started. The closest was a flashback to the secret ending where he still has his eyes shrouded by a bandana. Riku works as somewhat of a fill-in for Mickey's role in KH1, an entity we're waiting to see. Everyone knew who Mickey Mouse was during the course of KH1, just as everyone knows who Riku is during the course of KH2. They are the big payoff that we won't get until the end. And before we get to the end of the game, there's one last important visit to Hollow Bastion. On our final visit, the MCP has found a way to create more Heartless through Ansem's data, wrecking the town. The journey itself has Sora teaming up with Tron on the inside, while we also see the Final Fantasy gang trying to help from the outside. On Sora's end, they find Tron has a sense of humanity despite being an AI, perhaps himself having a heart, while the FF gang retake control of Ansem's computer on their end. And with all the work they've done starting to pay off, they reclaim and remember the town's original name,
Radiant Garden.
Show me your strength.
Now, as one more last thing to do in Radiant Garden, Sephiroth appears as a super boss just like in Kingdom Hearts 1. He himself is more powerful than his KH1 incarnation, but so is Sora, so it's debatable which one's harder. Upon beating him, he says that the only one capable of eliminating him is Cloud. However, the true point of Cloud's motives hasn't been to eliminate his darkness represented by Sephiroth, it's closer to him fearing going completely to the light, which is what Tifa has wanted him to do. Cloud on his own even realizes that he cannot defeat Sephiroth, leading to Tifa coming in to give him some of her light. At this point, Cloud hasn't lost his darkness, but has light protecting him, running somewhat parallel to Riku's story in Chain of Memories, as well as Tifa's role during the scenario in Cloud's subconscious from the original FF7. Though while there, it resulted in Tifa and Cloud finally reuniting. Cloud's story ends here with him and Sephiroth going off to face a great battle somewhere else that's yet to be concluded in the series. Given the narrative of Cloud and Sephiroth's unending battle in the compilation, I don't think it will end in the Kingdom Hearts series either. Upon completing enough areas, a strange energy emerges near Twilight Town, sparking reason to go back, especially given the strange picture of Roxas with the Twilight Town gang. And since this is the real Twilight Town gang, they don't recognize Roxas there. They do feel a small connection with him, however, which seems illogical since this Pence and that Pence are different Pences, but 358 explains this, so we'll get to that in the next part. As well, the pouch and crystal Mickey gave them at the start of their journey were both one of a kind, meaning that copies can't exist. They then all meet up at the mansion where they fight Nobodies and meet up with Mickey, who tells them that Ansem the Wise is in the organization's stronghold and accidentally lets it slip that he promised Riku not to reveal his whereabouts to Sora. Within the mansion, they find Diz's computer, which they believe Ansem used to sneak into the organization. And they put together that the password is Ansem's favorite ice cream flavor, sea salt ice cream. With the password entered, Sora, Donald, Goofy, and the King are able to make it to the Dark Realm where they can finish off Organization 13. There's only one fight left with too many Nobodies for the party to handle that can only be defeated with the assistance from a suddenly appearing Axel who puts his entire being, or maybe lack of being, into clearing a path for the party.
Watch this.
Ending his non-existence in the process. While subtle in KH2, or subtle as KH can be at least, Axel is near the organization's bottom rung. His lackadaisical mannerisms make him unrespected. We see Marluxia, Saïx, Zaldin, Zigbar, and even Xemnas show this towards him. Demyx is disrespected too, but he proudly calls himself a chicken. Axel's only friend in the organization was Roxas. The happiest moments he can remember are when it was just him and Roxas. Freeing Naminé, putting Sora to sleep, fighting Roxas at the start, kidnapping Kairi, saving Sora here. All of that had one selfish reason: reunite with Roxas. Only issue, it's kinda hard to reunite two people that don't exist. Axel's final mark on Sora is letting him know that he just wants Roxas back, a thought that sits with him as he walks into the world that never was. We have finally reached the area teased in the secret ending of Kingdom Hearts 1, and rather than being a realm of darkness as our heroes thought, this is a realm of nothing. A world that never should have been. And this isn't just cutscenes or teases of this world. We are walking in the same distorted city infested with the same Heartless we saw in that ending. And on the exact same floor, we saw who we now know as Roxas. His will begins a duel within Sora's heart to fight for supremacy of their being. His last-ditch effort, and yet again we see him wielding Oathkeeper and Oblivion, the Keyblade forms representing Sora's relationship with Kairi and Riku, as well as light and darkness. Two people Roxas has barely met, and two powers a nothing can't belong to. This isn't a true physical battle, but an internal one inside of Sora's heart, with the same mural we saw at the beginning of the game, having Riku, Kairi, Donald, and Goofy, people close to Sora that Roxas doesn't really know. And perhaps this isn't purposeful, but this is a heavy contender for hardest mandatory fight in the game, which I feel drives forward that an internal struggle will often prove more difficult than an external one. We don't want to accept who we are.
My heart
This battle doesn't end when Sora wins, it ended when Roxas decided to lose, ending with a flashback to when Xemnas gave Roxas his purpose, and one final scene where Roxas and Axel see each other at the end, on the same clock tower from earlier with sea salt ice cream, where they used to hang out after work. Wondering if the two of them and her, presumably Naminé, have a heart at all. Roxas goes back to reunite with Sora, while Axel seemingly goes away for good, allowing Axel a ceremonious end, but not a happy one.
Give me strength!
Now that Roxas has once again accepted his place in Sora's heart, their potential has unlocked with the final form. Its pure white color, floating keyblades, master magic, and long combos give the idea that this is how a Keyblade master should look. Sora has reached his peak right when he needs it, the most powerful form you can reach with a Keyblade. Our heroes of light are going to siege the castle that never was to reunite with Kairi, Riku, and Ansem the Wise. And maybe one more as Naminé comes to save Kairi and Pluto, because Pluto's also here. Those three are then almost stopped by Saïx, then they're all saved by a cloaked man Kairi calls Riku.
Riku, you're really here?
Oh, fuck!
That sure does motivate us to run further, but in this one big room we're reminded by Saïx that, oh fuck, there's 3 more organization members left before Xemnas. Saïx points towards a heart-shaped moon that's watched us the whole world, to tell Sora that it's actually a Kingdom Hearts created by the organization through the hearts Sora has released during all of his adventures. And he believes that once completed, it will grant hearts to the organization. As Saïx summons a boatload of Heartless, Kairi, Riku, Pete, and Maleficent all walk in from different entrances to see it happen, with Riku having his own new Keyblade and giving one to Kairi. Yeah, this one little gift is when the Keyblade mystery I emphasized in part 1 kinda starts to die, but it's more relevant in part 3, so I'll leave it alone for today's concern. Of all people, that old dude from the beginning, identified as Xigbar during the second act, stops the Heartless from attacking Sora so they can duel it out. But not before confusing Sora by calling him Roxas again and saying that he doesn't even make half the hero the other Keyblade Masters did. A statement that's meant more and more with each new entry you would not believe. But right now it means jack shit because he dissipates like a lamer on the floor. And while that went on, Mickey actually did his own thing. Mickey finds a struggling Diz, who then removes his bandages to reveal that he was Ansem the Wise. Diz's racism for nobody. Diz's hatred for Nobodies stemming from the betrayal of his apprentices and the failure he's felt as a master to them. Within Ansem's secret reports, which are written by Ansem the Wise this time, it's revealed that the first 6 members of Organization 13 were all apprentices of Ansem. As well, it reveals their human names. Whenever they became Nobodies, their names were rearranged and given an X, which is why Sora changed to Roxas, and interestingly, Xemnas is an anagram of Ansem rather than Xehanort, since the Heartless of Xehanort considers himself Ansem. As Diz and Ansem have such little screen time, I'd consider reading these reports essential for understanding the psyche of the man during the course of all 3 games. Just make sure to read it in a Christopher Lee voice for accuracy. As Ansem is reunited with his old friend, they take a machine of his to a high point of the castle so they can destroy the artificial Kingdom Hearts. At the same time, Sora finally catches up to Riku and Kairi. After over a year, most of it where she forgot him, Kairi sees Sora again, and while confused, Sora does have to give thanks to Ansem, the Seeker of Darkness, despite all the bad he's done, which I think is a great moment for showing Sora's compassion, even if Kairi tells Sora how it's actually Riku right afterwards. As Riku refused to let Naminé rid him completely of darkness and Chain of Memories, he always had that chance for Ansem to take hold again, which in the time between Chain and 2 happened, giving him a sense of guilt. Even while Sora searched for Riku, he didn't want to reunite with Sora in his state. He accepted this form so that he could protect his friends and defeat the organization. Riku wanted to get out of this form himself first, but Sora reassures him that everyone will help him out of it, growing our party by 2 for the final 3 organization members, starting with a one-on-one fight against Luxord where he turns our whole party into cards. Bruh. By the way, sorry for skipping talking about Luxord for any of y'all Luxord fans, but let's be real, he's done nothing in any of the games so far. As he's falling, he pisses Sora off by calling him Roxas once again, just as Saïx does before their final confrontation, as well as put a wall keeping Riku and Kairi out of the fight. Friends, y'all were my power, what the fuck? Upon his defeat, Saïx reaches for Kingdom Hearts one last time, begging for a heart, leaving Sora in confusion yet again as to why people keep calling him Roxas. But then finally, Jesus Christ, Riku looks at Sora and tells him that Roxas was his nobody, brought into non-existence when he freed his and Kairi's heart at Hollow Bastion during KH1, and explains that after Roxas betrayed the organization, Riku used that as the prime time to capture him for unification with Sora, and since Riku couldn't beat him on his own, he had to release his dark power in the most chuny fucking way possible.
I have to release the power in my heart. The dark power that I've been holding back.
Riku theorizes that the reason Roxas betrayed the organization was just to meet Sora, which in the end happened permanently. As Ansem's machine reaches the full of its power, he warns Mickey that it's likely to self-destruct. Just as Sora and the party arrive for Ansem to apologize to Roxas, Riku, and the rest of them for his foolishness. A foolishness Xemnas only comes in to rub in his face, which Ansem can only accept while pointing out how the apprentice knows only as much as the master, making both of them the fools, leading into the machine's destruction, destroying much of Kingdom Hearts, releasing hearts back to their heartless form, or reuniting with a nobody, perhaps to become whole again. And, for some reason, it turns Riku into his sexy guy form.
He's just a sexy guy.
Only explained with,
Ansem did say anything could happen.
which explains nothing but who gives a shit. Riku is finally in the same party as Sora with his own Keyblade, just for them to go fight Xemnas while Pete and Maleficent deal with the hordes of Heartless attacking the castle. Xemnas tells the 3 Keyblade users, because I guess Kairi's done with it, that they should be more tolerant of those who live in between light and darkness. Being racist is uncool, which almost seems reasonable, but Riku calls him on his bullshit because remember, they've been fucking up all the worlds, which Xemnas claims to do because his lack of feeling prevents him from feeling remorse for his actions. Just as every nobody, he only does what he remembers wanting to do, which for Xehanort the Apprentice was claim Kingdom Hearts, sparking Xemnas' first phase by the same skyscraper from the city in a one-on-one battle against Sora, a confrontation paralleling the one Riku and Roxas had, who were both forms of Xemnas and Sora in a certain way. With 0 options left for Xemnas, he attempts to become one with the unfinished artificial Kingdom Hearts, a move sparking the final door into a new plane spawned by Xemnas, where the final battle shall occur. This door can only be opened by the 3 Keyblades, Sora's from the Realm of Light, Mickey's which he found in the Realm of Darkness, and Riku's Keyblade known as the Way to Dawn, representing the state between. Interestingly, it still resembles his Soul Eater sword he used in other appearances, as that weapon was meant as an intermediary between when the Keyblade considered him unworthy and now when he's regained his worth. As of this point in the series, these are the only ones we've seen wield a Keyblade, as Roxas is a separate version of Sora, and by God do I have a hard time counting Kairi. It's now time to end the final remnants of Ansem's research. All 5 of them attempt to walk in, but Xemnas forces Mickey and Kairi out of the door, leaving only Sora, Donald, Goofy, and Riku in the distorted plane, which consists of one of the most stylish bosses of all time, beginning with a run towards the mechanical dragon controlled by Xemnas on a cityscape Sora slices through, followed by a complete destruction of the dragon's engines. And then one last phase against Xemnas in a mysterious nobody armor surrounded by the weapons used by organization members. A beautiful and exhilarating final boss, though noticeably easy.
I need more rage. I need more hearts.
Xemnas, there's more to a heart than just anger or hate. It's full of all kinds of feelings. Don't you remember?
Unfortunately, I don't.
Wow, that's a bit of a fuck you to us. Well, the gang's defeated Xemnas and they can leave, right as the castle begins to crumble like in any good game. Since Riku himself no longer belongs to the darkness, he can't open dark portals anymore, meaning that Naminé appears one last time to open one for the gang, though she's ghostly and no one can see her. By the way, Pluto's here now. The reason they can't see her is because she's fused back with Kairi, as she was her nobody created at the same moment Roxas was. And Naminé's initial gravitation towards Roxas was because of their origin, and as long as Sora and Kairi are together, they can be together again, ending Kingdom Hearts.
Sora! Riku!
What?
Oh, fuck!
Yeah, sometimes there's the reason that shit is easy. Everyone gets out except Sora and Riku, so the two of them, the ones most affected by Ansem and Xemnas' desires, take one final fight to Xemnas, destroying the world that never was in the process, and ending in a true realm of nothing, where Sora and Riku vow that even if darkness, light, and nothing are eternal, Xemnas won't be. Starting a final fight I consider damn near perfect. Xemnas has full control of the nothing they're in, while Sora and Riku are the light and darkness forcing their way in. He has the upper hand at every corner during this fight. The only thing pulling through is Sora and Riku's friendship, culminating in one of the greatest feeling and looking final attacks in a PS2 game. Fatigued, the two boys stumble through a door to darkness, ending in a beach on the Dark Realm, where the two find solace with each other and the knowledge that the Realm of Light is safe for everyone else. Sora and Riku both admit their respect for each other and love for having each other as a friend. It's one of the most human scenes of the series, showing the relief they both have. As long as they're together, Sora and Riku are reunited, and nothing can come between them now. Their peace is a selfish one gained through their time with each other and their time apart. However, selfishness leaves some people out, and they'll be forced back by one item. The letter Kairi wrote to Sora during the prologue shows up on the beach, which upon reading, a door to light appears that causes Sora to fall into the ocean as he did during the KH1 intro, but this time with Riku by his side, which means they're finally back on their island, where they see Kairi and the Disney gang. For the first time in the series, Sora, Donald, Goofy, Riku, Mickey, and Kairi are reunited and at peace, which by extension means Roxas and Naminé found peace. Everyone is home, ending Kingdom Hearts 2 and the entire Kingdom Hearts saga on a triumphant note. The journey our heroes set out on has come to completion.
We're back.
You're home.
And you and I, there's a new land.
At least, that's the way it could have been. After the end of the credit roll, which showed the impact Sora's party made in every world they touched, Kairi comes to a relaxed Riku and Sora with a letter from the king, implying one more call to action for our heroes in Kingdom Hearts 3. Trumpets ablaze, implying a more upbeat adventure than the ones before, followed then by yet another vague secret ending with text scrolling, 3 Keyblade wielders in battle armor, and the Keyblades used by Sora, Riku, and Mickey gathering dust around thousands of other Keyblades, implying our heroes long gone, most likely done in by a Keyblade war, as that's one of the vague words shown on screen, while someone who may be the new villain of the next arc appears shrouded in darkness. This vague scene and letter are the only two things Westerners experienced in Kingdom Hearts 2 that hinted towards a new game. There was nothing left to uncover. However, 1 year after the release of KH2 in North America, Japan received Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. It tweaked gameplay, added new items, introduced limit form, and inserted new cutscenes previously from the Kingdom Hearts 2 novelization. Most of these scenes have something to do with the organization, and personally, I think they're placed in the main story a tad clumsily. The only ones I'd consider absolutely key know are the ones around Sora's fight with Roxas and his reunion with Axel. That scene and the actual fight with Roxas were not in the original. Any of the additions I consider essential to Kingdom Hearts 2's story I mentioned during the meat of the video, though there are 2 other scenes essential for later games I want to talk about. Both scenes being placed back to back right in the middle of the Hollow Bastion Heartless battle scenario, and they just don't really fit there. One begins with a cloaked figure walking into a secret area past Ansem's computer. Once we hear his voice, it's clearly Xemnas, who sits down to greet who he calls a friend that we can see is one of the armors from that secret ending. And then one following scene where Xigbar and Zexion discuss said room as the Chamber of Repose, which is the opposite of a alleged second chamber within Castle Oblivion known as the Chamber of Waking. What's more important here is the confirmation that the Keyblade War actually happened in the past, not the future, and Xehanort showed up with amnesia afterwards, making the brand new extended secret ending more questionable with a bald man, batshit crazy fight choreography, Kingdom Hearts, Roxas within one of the suits of armor, and an appearance by Mickey Mouse. This is the true teaser for the tale Kingdom Hearts is about to tell, one Sora has no clue about, unless the one secret boss fight can be considered canon. This is a battle against Lingering Will, a piece of the armor we saw that lacks a wearer. It only persists through raw emotion and a will to succeed, no body and no heart. As Lingering Will is a Keyblade user from what we know as an era past, it shows abilities Sora never even thought of, mainly morphing the Keyblade into other forms. As much as it seemed, final form and dual wielding is not mastery of the Keyblade. Lingering Will is that mastery. Not only is that shown by design, but difficulty as well. On critical mode, this is the hardest boss fight I've ever beaten. Period. No stop. I have not beaten anything harder than this. It took me 6 hours of practice to beat him. Here's a link to the video of when I did it on my second channel. This is the power of a Keyblade user at their max potential and what we will see in future titles. I'm gonna be honest, it's a strange feeling when there's more after Kingdom Hearts 2. I'm not one of those fans that think the series should have ended here. I love most of the upcoming games and the stories they tell. I'm glad they exist. It's just that the nice wrapped up bow is almost immediately taken away from us, and it tears me up inside. Even writing this script now, I was tempted to end the video before bringing up the credits roll. There's a sense of completion at that moment that, as of now, Kingdom Hearts has not reached again. Our main heroes had their happy reunion, but not quite everyone else did. Come back in part 3 where I'll discuss Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, 358 Days Over 2, and Recoded, a trio of Kingdom Hearts games announced and planned at the same time as each other.